today we kickstart this event with the IMGL MasterClass, moderated by the one and only Dr. Jörg Hoffmann. So, Jörg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sultans. If there are any speakers joining me for that panel, I would happy to welcome you. Good morning, and well, kudos, you made it after such a lovely night out there in some bars. Oops, wow, they're all here. It's amazing. Good morning again. This panel is called IMGL MasterClass. Those of you who never heard of IMGL or about IMGL, it stands for the International Masters of Gaming Law, which is a US-based association of gaming lawyers. Not only gaming lawyers, experts in the field of gaming law, and well, advisory topics worldwide. It's more than 45 jurisdictions and 33 plus territories and states in the United States. And it's a sort of well-recognized experts. And it's not only that we have members here, we also sometimes from time to time invite guests when we think we have brilliant experts, which is the case today. So our topic is dealing with sustainability. That's a very modern but very important topic. It's also dealing with new technologies, in particular with AI, artificial intelligence, also, of course, ledger technology, blockchain technology. And I'm happy to introduce you to my panelists, brilliant experts in these fields. Some of them are members of the IMGL, starting with ladies first, Paula Murphy. She is Business Development Manager at Mindway AI. AI, of course, stands for Artificial Intelligence in Denmark. The company is based in Denmark. And the company is a specialized tech supplier for the gaming industry, whose player protection solutions are based on a unique combination of neuroscience, expert psychological assessment, and AI technology. I'm sure Paula will introduce the product and let us know how it works. They started and became one of the leading companies and suppliers in the industry. It's based in Ours, as I said. But Paula comes from London. You're living in London, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Lucky you are. How wonderful is this? So next to Paula is Piotr Dinowski. You saw Piotr on the panel already. He's a partner with Bird & Bird Law Firm in Warsaw, Poland. One of the leading intellectual property, patent, and IP litigation lawyers in Poland. And Piotr advises on all aspects of gaming law, in particular online gambling and social gambling. Next to him, we have Simon Planzer, who moderated the panel yesterday. Simon is the founder of Planzer Law in Switzerland, Zurich-based gaming law boutique. He's also a general member of the IMGL, which means long-standing private practice, very well recognized, publishing a lot. So he is a lecturer as well. Studied and did some research at Harvard University, the College of Europe, and the European University Institute. And then last but not least, it's an honor to welcome again Professor Dr. Dean or Dan, whatever you want.
Depends on the pronouncing.
It depends on the pronouncing, yes. Rakic. It doesn't sound German, but Dean lives and lectures in Germany. He accompanies customers in their digital transformance processes as a blockchain AI data science expert and advisor. He looks on many years of experience in architecture for the processing of large amounts of data, and his experience is more than 27 years. By the way, that equals my experience in the gaming industry. I'm advising gaming companies for 27 years as well.
That's the point why we are.
Yeah, that's the point, and that's the disadvantage. We're both old gold guys in this industry, right? So there's many interesting things. More than 10 years in blockchain technology research, and of course, some patents already filed. I keep that short now because we want to talk about these things, and I think we should start with the technical side, and probably, Dean, with you, about blockchain. There was a panel yesterday which was very interesting, giving some background about this, but our topic is how could these new technologies be applied to the gaming industry? How could they serve to improve protection of players? Years ago, we were talking about algorithm and stuff. Now it's a bit more. And blockchain is something, some people who don't know about it, they only refer to cryptocurrencies and say, well, this is black market, this is money laundering, this is a bad thing. We touch on this later, is also in some minds of regulators because they are not informed. But this is part of it, and a very, very minor part of it. There's more, and you let us know what is more.
Yeah. For sure. Thank you for having me there. When we start talking about, sorry for my voice, it's on a Zoltan guilty for that, for the last night.
I apologize, it's because we had some drinks together. My voice is the same.
Jörg told me that it's not a bad voice, it's a new voice. That's fine. When we start talking about the blockchain and in the full mouth of talking around the world is a Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. But the blockchain does not start with a Bitcoin 2008 and or in February 2009 when Satoshi Nakamoto published his peer-to-peer cash system in the white paper. When we talk about the blockchain, is actually about data and data storing. In a simple words, the blockchain is a record-keeping system in a digital form. It happens many years ago that the distributed databases and distributed data peers more than 35 years. Also, the smart contract, which is the most tokenized system I use today, is more than 25 years on the market. It starts with a Bitcoin just as a point to use the technology or record-keeping system based in a digital form to simplify the peer-to-peer transaction between the people. What is actually the main feature of a blockchain? It's an immutability. The first of listed. That means that the records which are stored already in the block, in some block or transaction, contain some data about any data exchange between peers through the network are not unchangeable. There is no process of alteration still already known. That means it's pretty hard to destroy the system, to hack the system, and to harm the data or make any changes. The data are already in the digital ledger, so to say. That means also that system based on the blockchain record keeping, actually the database that keeps these records are pretty secure. What means secure? Secure means we need a lot of power and a lot of time to change or to delete data in the whole system, because it is not possible just to change or alter one single record without updating all others in the network. And it pretty simplifies the system. That builds a trust amongst the peers, among the people who is using a blockchain-based record-keeping system. From the period of appearing cryptocurrencies, it's just a derivative part of a blockchain technology. In most of all industries where we have a data exchange-based transactional process, we can apply or implement a blockchain. It is not always that a blockchain should carry some financial transaction. It does, but it is not necessary to have only a cryptocurrency to build a blockchain. Especially in the gambling industry, where normally we deal with the financial part, it's very suitable. But also in other industries, when we need just to build a trust between the peers, between the nodes who exchange the data, it's very, very suitable.
So one of the the biggest advantage is the safety of this
The safety, yes.
technology.
The safety.
And could you figure out probably how important this role is played in the gaming industry? Is it applied, or is it just wishful thinking and we're looking into the future?
Sort kind of all of that. We have already an implementation in the gaming and gambling industry, mostly based on the crypto, but the record-keeping systems are in some of the bigger player in the gaming and iGaming or responsive gaming already applied, and they use just the transactional processing to store and to keep their data. The point is, especially in the gaming industry, when we use a blockchain as a record keeping, that the people whose data are stored are actually the owner of the data. The main point in this point is who is owner of the data. And the gamer or gamblers are actually the owners of their data, and they are responsible for their data.
Technically speaking, if I were an operator and I'm embracing this sort of technology, what do I have to do to apply this technically? Programming, is that a big project, or is it easily done?
Technically, it looks like very easily, but it could not be, because it's not only just, yes, we can solve on-ramp, off-ramp payment in the gaming, gambling, whatever, but implementation of the blockchain should have a bigger preparation of the whole system. The main point is always not to harm already existed system. And in the most cases when we implement a new platform, especially digital platform in the gaming and the gambling industry, we need to make some changes in our system when we apply. By applying a blockchain is not always necessary to make some changes. And we can just duplicate the backend system and make a storage of our data.
Thank you very much. It makes my understanding much better. Looking at the side of regulation, maybe Piotr, from your experience, and probably not just looking at Poland, but let's say cross-border, operational, global, whatever, what sort of technology, of new technologies, would you think the industry could and should embrace?
Yes, so blockchain is certainly one of those technologies which would be very useful exactly for the reasons that they are named. So it's a very good and very safe for how it works for record keeping. But of course there is a bit of a problem with blockchain from the regulatory perspective, because it's a decentralized system. So there is not like one central repository, which on the other hand makes the system safe, because there is no one single server that you can break into, modify the data, alter the data, and then you are solved. But the beauty of blockchain is that you have as many copies of the data in the system as you have peers. So basically everyone has a copy, who is in the blockchain, because also what is important to understand, there is no single blockchain. It's, again, not something single universal. There are various blockchains. You can set up those chains. There are also some, for those who are more interested, in the past some controversies about some blockchain platforms where there were some issues with potential modification of the data, and then you can have blockchains which kind of root out from the previous blockchain. So the ecosystem of it is actually a bit more complicated, and therefore problematic from the regulatory perspective, because of course the thinking of regulators are still quite old school, and what they expect from the operators is that the data is stored on one server in specific place. In many countries even it's said that it has to be on the territory of the country. So in Poland you have to have a backup copy of all the data related to bets on the territory of Poland, available 24/7 to the authorities. And then with blockchain, which is decentralized, I would say it's even more tricky than using, for example, cloud computing, which is also in a way decentralized, but at least you can have a single point of access. So yes, it would be interesting to see how regulators would really look at it. So it's definitely a viable technology, but because the regulation usually is a couple of years behind the actual state of the art in technology, it might be problematic from technology point of view. But then, as regards other technologies, well, definitely AI is in various sorts of applications also something which is definitely would be very, very useful for the industry, both for like conducting analysis of players' behavior and identifying, for example, problematic players and analyzing a lot of big data on them, but also AI in the context or in connection with biometrics, which could be used for example, for KYC procedures, age verification, identity verification, both in land-based institutions. So, for example, a player could scan his ID card or passport, and then when going to casino, he would not have to show the documents because the camera would scan his face, recognize, and let him in. But of course, that's again tricky from the regulatory perspective, because then GDPR comes into place, privacy protection, whether collecting data in that way wouldn't be excessive. Should it be deleted quickly after someone leaves the casino or logs out from an online platform, or how long it could be stored and to what extent? So that's, of course, there are a lot of regulatory challenges, but a lot of opportunities. But unfortunately, all in all, my feeling is that the gambling industry, compared to many other industries, is somewhat lagging behind with embracing those new technologies. So even though online gambling is something not very new and it's present, and you see a lot of developments in terms of virtualization and so on in gambling, but those technologies which are more about security, verification, and so on, somehow are not yet, at least to my feeling, embraced as much as they could be, still with the caveat of those regulatory challenges which are there.
I think it's a very good point. You mentioned KYC, biometrics. You probably can use your iPhone, create a new app, and then it's the easiest way of identifying, verifying players. What we see is, in the gaming industry, technology drives this industry, and the regulators, in particular the legislators, are always behind. It takes years. And I think the experience is, if we talk about blockchain, if you talk about artificial intelligence, biometrics, the regulators are very reluctant at the first stage, because for some simple reason, they do not know what it is, how it works. They don't have that sort of education. This is nothing to blame them for. It's simply the process that the industry needs to provide information and intelligence. And then it's left to the lawyers, because we're talking about data. It's all about data. And data always linked to data protection. And there is a very complicated regulation. So, Simon, what do you think, from the legal point of view, what is the key for regulating these new technologies, which is a question looking into the future, because it's not the law of today?
Thank you, Jörg. I think really one of the absolute keys to save innovation and allow for competition is technology neutral regulation. So what do I mean by that? The opposite of it would be that you essentially, by regulation, prohibit a certain technology. And I can illustrate it maybe with an example so that you would see that can hardly make sense if you do that. Imagine in the field of responsible gambling, the regulation would impose that you can only use one specific software. So let's say it wasn't Mindway, terrible, right? That would mean that innovative approaches such as by Mindway AI would then be by regulation excluded. So that would be an example from the software field, and you probably agree that doesn't seem to make any sense. And then I can enlarge this to a blockchain topic, say cryptocurrencies. So the regulation would state cryptocurrencies are not permitted in the field of gambling, for instance, in a national regime. Again, I don't think that makes sense. What would make sense, and that's technology neutral, is to say these are the goals and these are the safeguards that have to be ensured and respected. And as long as the technology actually reaches these goals and respects the safeguards, it doesn't really matter, or the regulation shouldn't be interested what it is. Maybe I can give a topical example from the EU. While the European Union typically tries to pursue that, exactly in order to strive innovation and competition, the USB-C plugs have now been imposed as a standard, right? So the industry actually has to respect that standard. And of course, it's a trade-off between convenience on the one hand, of knowing, well, we have this one plug, but on the other hand, it could also kill innovation, because in a few years, something better can be on the market. So I think technology-neutral regulation is really important.
I think we have to monitor this. You mentioned artificial intelligence. You can see on our panel, this is natural intelligence. But what is artificial intelligence? Paula, I think you could give us like a clue about this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually talked quite a lot about AI yesterday, and I feel like a lot of the conversations were sort of quite conceptual and also sort of focusing on the idea of cheating on your exam papers or generating content through AI. But actually there are real-world applications that exist now and that many, many operators are using. So we have AI solutions active in 40 different regulatory jurisdictions, tracking some 6.5 million players as we speak, 24/7 in real time. But the AI that we're talking about at Mindway is more machine learning, right? So it's taking the concept of artificial intelligence and, excuse me, I also have a new voice, and combining it with human expertise, right? And that's the really important thing. It's teaching the machines to be able to do on scale the job that a real specialized expert could do, but doing the heavy lifting and spreading that across millions of customers, rather than it being a psychological expert looking at a few cases. You can teach them how the psychologist thinks and what the psychologist gleans from the data, and then teach the machine to scale that. And that's exactly what we do at Mindway.
So is this based on algorithms, cluster technology, things like this, the technology behind it?
Yes.
And it's 24/7, of course. So
It's 24/7 in real time.
the machine never sleeps.
Yeah, absolutely. The machine never sleeps. So we have leading experts in the field of responsible gaming, leading psychologists, people that have worked in this field for many, many years. Our founder, Kim Morrison, is a professor of neuroscience. So we bring all this kind of scientific experience together to analyze the data and then literally teach the machines to replicate that.
It serves to improve player protection, but on one specific aspect, it is very timely and very important. We've seen from Wixio Gambling Compliance that just recently the UK, the Gambling Commission, imposed a fine of, I think it was in the amount of £19.2 million it was, right? Yes, something like this. The biggest fine ever in the UK Gambling Commission against William Hill. And this is because they obviously infringed some rules. It's a couple of things, but basically it was player protection. People could spend more money than they could afford in a very short time frame. Your software can protect the operator from infringing these obligations of player protection.
Yeah.
How would it be?
So it's for us, it's about early intervention, and it's about spotting unique behavioral patterns. So we believe very much that problem gambling is individual, right? So it manifests in many, many different ways. You or I, if we had an issue, would not necessarily follow one pattern. So you have to look at the individual player, and you have to look at their individual gambling behaviors. And it's not just about financial patterns. It's looking at their full behavioral pattern, understanding how that interacts, and then making an assessment based on that. So what our system does is it rates everybody on a risk score, on a risk level, but on top of that, we also layer alerts. So if somebody, for example, was placing such high wages as that, it would show up immediately, and the system would intervene. We would have alerts built in so that it could actually intervene in real time, and it would also flag it up to the operator that this is somebody you need to speak to. So if you imagine your player database as like a pyramid with your sustainable players at the bottom and your severe problem cases at the top, it splits it into that so that you can know who to speak to and how and when. But if you start to spot somebody's behavior sort of moving up that pyramid, you can intervene early enough to bring them back to the sustainable level, therefore keeping the player longer and preventing any kind of gambling harms in doing that.
What are the key considerations? It's about tracking player behavior. And as an operator, if I'm going to focus on these issues, what would you think, just summarizing, are the key considerations I have to keep in mind?
The key considerations you need to keep in mind as an operator. So as I said, you're looking at the individualized behavior. So we are tracking sort of financial transactions, but we're also tracking things like, are these players playing at antisociable hours? And just because somebody is playing at antisociable hours, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a problem gambler, right? They might be on a shifted sleep schedule. So it tracks that in detail. So we'll look at, do they start playing in the evening and then the play goes late into the night? We have indicators around when most people's paydays are. Do we see cluster of play around when they've been paid? We track around weekends. We track all sorts of like loss chasing behavior down to the granular detail. So it works off looking at the spin level data from the operator and assessing every element of that play. So we see in 10-minute blocks exactly what each gambler's done, and we're able to then assess the behavior based on that.
And the machine ticks the boxes. It's different to, let's say, the team of a social responsibility officer who could apply some guidelines, some rules, ticks the box as well, but probably fails. The machine cannot fail because that's looking at everything, this sort of cluster.
Yeah, and it's looking at in granular detail and relation to the other things. So it's not threshold based. We're not saying if somebody stakes over X amount, then we need to intervene with them. We're looking at their unique individualized behavior.
That's interesting.
patterns.
Simon, I bet you will inform us about one very interesting case in Switzerland. There was an explosion in terms of numbers, in terms of figures regarding player-bearing systems, self-exclusions, and whatever, where you think artificial intelligence could help to avoid issues that are not really necessary.
Yes, I truly think so, and I think it's absolutely needed, and I'm happy to illustrate the problem. Until recently, that means before the regulated online market in Switzerland, we had every year approximately 3,000 more new players being banned in the casinos for suspicion of playing either problematically or beyond their financial means. And I'll revisit those two notions because I think it's important not to confuse them. So this was until, let's say, 2018-19, approximately 3,000. And since then, we see an explosion of the numbers, like 10,000 and 15,000 a year, so 5 times more. And you wonder, how can that happen, right? I would argue that epidemiologically it's unlikely that you suddenly have a 5 times bigger problem, that it doesn't develop like that, right? So simply it was regulated online gambling was introduced, and typically the way it goes in Switzerland is if you trigger any alert with an operator, and these alerts are not defined by law, each casino has to define its so-called social concept. They have to define that by themselves. So you have many alerts, possible alerts. And as soon as you reach one, the compliance team essentially has to reach out to the player and ask for financial documents. And the player is given a couple of weeks to submit these documents. What happens if they don't? They get nationwide blocked. automatically. So this is what I would call, a static binary approach, as opposed to a dynamic, say, smart approach, right? And it's very, very unfortunate because most or many of these players may not actually have a problem gambling issue, but for whatever reason, privacy reasons or any other reason, forgetting about the email, forgetting about the message, or landing
Simply
in the
not
spam.
being in the mood.
Yeah, so they're just getting banned, right? And maybe if you allow, Jürgen, one more thing, and I'll be happy
No, I
to
don't allow.
give on the floor, because these two things are often confused. One thing is problem gambling, and the other thing is affordability, what you mentioned in relation to the fine in the UK. And it's really not the same. I believe Mindway looks into problem gambling, right? Yeah. But affordability is very, very different. I mean, you can say somebody cannot afford to gamble above whatever, 2,000 a month, but that person would never show like a symptom of problem gambling. It's really two different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is about understanding why that person is triggering the system and why we're looking at this person and saying, actually, this is an alert. So I think it's great that that's in place, but financial harms are not the only harms, and it's not the only reason that you would want to interact with a player. So what you actually need is that granular detail on what it is that's flagged up them as a problem, so that when your team goes in to talk to them, they can talk to them about the right things. It isn't always show me your pay slips, right? It might be that you are spending a lot of time gambling into the late hours of the night, and are you aware that, we're worried about when do you actually even sleep, right? That might be the conversation you want to have with them. And it's about arming your team with the right information and understanding of what those behaviors are so that you can make the intervention meaningful.
So finally, this means the software is not replacing the human intervention, it's supporting the team, right?
It's absolutely right, yeah, it's supporting it. So some of the intervention you would automate, but it's also about normalizing that conversation with all players, not just problem players. So even those guys that are in your sustainable group, you want to be rewarding that good behavior. You want to be making sure that you're having a conversation with them about, are they happy, are they comfortable? And meaning that they don't just expect to get a call from your RG team when they've triggered a high alert, right? They're used to speaking to you.
There is AI technology in customer service applications. Even if you like to book a hotel room or something else and you see someone is offering, you can ask me questions. Would the software, in terms of player protection, also start communicating with players, or is this left to the team, human intervention?
We do both. So we have automated interventions. We have, at Mindway, we've chosen to go down a route where we don't just serve all the data to the player. And the reason we have chosen that is because actually, if somebody is in a vulnerable situation and is in a vulnerable condition, you want to be really careful about what information you're sharing with them and how you're talking to them. Seeing all of that data could be sort of misinterpreted, and it could be something that tips an already vulnerable person sort of over the edge. So it's about using the intelligence and the information that we have in a way that is going to actually communicate to the player to actually help them and bring them back to a sustainable level of play. So we think about Mindway more as a lane-keeping assistant rather than a stop. So it's about just keeping people in the right lane and talking to them about the right things. Some of that can be automated. So you could send emails, you could send pop-ups, reinforcing the better behavior, or if they're lower down that pyramid. But for those guys that are right at the top, that are triggering some severe issues and that you're seeing really problematic play, I think the only way really is to intervene manually, whether that's somebody at the operator or whether that's pointing them towards pathways to help.
That makes sense, thank you. Before I come back to Piotr and asking you what can we do, what needs to be done to get regulators, lawmakers embrace new technologies? What is this sort of dialogue? I want to get back to you, Dean. There was this high roller mentioned, big amounts, huge money. Some players, they really like to spend a lot of money. And I think blockchain can serve to make things safer in terms of, communication, in terms of payments, in terms of whatever. Maybe you can give us some information on that.
Yeah, for sure. We know that high rollers or big whales bring a lot of money into the gambling and betting process in the whole gaming and gambling industry. And normally that belongs to the VIP sports book with their data about their personalities, and enjoy a lot of pleasure, like private jets and such things from the providers. Normally, when we put a blockchain, the data about the personality are encrypted, means anonymous. So it is not so easy to handle these data in the sports book. The one problem is most of them does not want to provide either their email address, so it could not be recognized through the system, through the process. The one of the possible way is to build a crypto-based sports book in that case, and the people will know about their identities, who are the people actually, and who will withdraw a big amount of money. This is one side from the story, one side of the coin. The another side is from the regulatory perspective, from the financial institutions. If they are anonymous on the process of gaming and betting, there will not be possible to find or to be taxable after that. So we know that KYC starts to be mandatory from the mid of last year. So putting the crypto books in the sports betting and all gambling industry make a little bit more sense nowadays, because it will be much more easier for the financial institutions to handle all of these processes and data about identities, because the identity is of course protected under the blockchain, but no more anonymity, so they can find them easily. And also it's lowering the costs of data operation.
I think it's not only about the costs, because blockchain is a server-based technology, and there's a lot of energy involved, and so consumption. If you're talking about, which is also part of our topic, sustainability, do you see any solutions to lower the cost, to lower the consumption application of energy with that technology? Because it's often questioned, since that is in view of many people too much.
The main focus and the most implementation is high energy consumption, about the proof of work based consensus protocol in the blockchain technology. Of course, a lot of computing power were needed for the data verification or a transactional verification process. But we have other protocols. They are not actually the energy consumers, high energy consumers. Normally, the mining process still exists, and it is very useful nowadays that miners using a renewable energy. But instead of using the proof of work, will be much more other possibilities with different consensus protocol-based technologies that are not energy consumers. So the story about energy consuming is a little bit lower from time to time.
Is this more related to hardware or to software to reduce these costs?
The cost is mostly on the hardware, because it's actually the computing power which is consumed for the mining process and building a transactional processing.
So would have to replace the old stuff by
Somehow,
modern technology.
with the modern technology, with the renewable energy sources for powering the mining process, or just to speed up the process. And also a part of this story is putting a better consensus protocol, no matter on which process or to which consensus protocol already belongs. The one problem which manage the transactional processing is scalability. We know that a Bitcoin-based system has already a low bandwidth in the second how many transactions or records can be verified and kept on the blocks. If we put the bandwidth of scalable mass mode transaction to have in a second or in a per time unit, then will be the energy consumption also on the lower level.
Thank you very much. Piotr, this all sounds excellent. So there's technology, it serves to protect, it serves to improve, but how can we get this applied? This is always a sort of a discussion with, I would say, lawmakers, of course, but the first instance maybe are the regulators. And as I said previously, regulators are behind because they don't know the technology and they don't understand. Probably because we never told them how it works. What would you suggest is the best way to communicate this to regulators, to those who have impact, and to do the next step in order to get this involved in the whole industry?
Yes, well, as you noted, Jörg, the biggest problem is lack of awareness with the regulators. But again, the problem also is that regulators from countries to countries vary. Some of them are pretty open and happy to talk to the industry, talk to the suppliers, listen, learn, and so on, whereas some other regulators are very close. They don't want to meet, even invited to conferences like this, for example. They will never accept and come even to listen, not to speak, because, okay, I understand that some regulators have issues with presenting any kind of positions at the conferences because they are afraid that then it will be used against them, that, oh, you said this and that. And, but they don't even want to come and listen. But yes, I mean, trying to educate them is definitely something which needs to be done, especially that there is not only lack of awareness, but there is also a lot of misconception about a lot of those things that we are discussing today. Like, yes, blockchain for an average person probably is mainly about cryptocurrencies, which especially in the recent years do not have the best press, not only because of various scams and so on, but also how the value of blockchain was diving and peaking and all of that. So it's very important to educate regulators, but also general public, because again, you know, what the regulators think and what the regulators know also needs to relate to the average awareness and knowledge of society as well. So if they will also see the pressure from the societies that they want to have something, then they will be more inclined to, because after all, someone has to vote and get them to their positions. So they have to count with their voters. But yes, there are a couple of, let's say, mental problems or considerations which I understand the regulators have. So first one is that yes, a lot of those new technologies are decentralized, which is from the mental perspective a big difficulty for regulators, because they like to control the things and have a feeling that something is really within their realm of powers, and if something is decentralized, it's definitely not, or at least to a little extent. So it's also important to explain to them that it doesn't mean that it has to be dangerous, that there can be certain standards and so on. As Simon said, so as long as it meets certain requirements and standards, it's okay. But yes, the big problem is also what Dejan mentioned, anonymity. And that's a big problem for regulators.
Who do you think they will listen to if there's new topics coming up about technology? Will it be trade associations, probably some lawyers representing the industry itself, or maybe even an operator applying for an approval of something new, and then they have to face it and make up their mind? What do you think is the best approach?
Well, I would say a little bit of everything is definitely important. Yes, I mean, industry associations and so on usually have a better platform to talk to the regulators, and regulators are more open to talk to them rather than to the single operators or suppliers. So obviously that should be done. But yes, sometimes throwing a question to the regulator, or in some countries you can apply for so-called official interpretation of the regulations. So that's also something that you use from time to time to,
So
force them to think over certain things.
we could use Paula and Dean as brand ambassadors for new technologies. I made a very interesting experience just recently at ICE in London. There's this Monday, which is called ICE Vox. It's a day of conferences. And I moderated a panel which was also dealing with AI and blockchain, a few other things, sustainability as well. And there were people from Amazon Web Services from California, one expert on blockchain, not that brilliant expert as you are, but brilliant people as well. And the regulator from the Netherlands, René Jansen, who is very open-minded and very well open to dialogue with the industry. Critical, but open-minded. And we were talking about blockchain, we were talking about AI, and I raised this question. So you're a member of GREF, the Gaming Regulatory European Forum, where you can find all the European regulators be representing their countries. So is this a topic in your group, and how do you approach it? And, well, not surprisingly, the answer was not really. They're more reluctant because they do not understand what's behind it, because nobody told them. And when we discussed this, and as a result of discussion, say, well, it could be interesting, and we should learn more. That is the first step. And I think nobody could be more qualified than the experts. If you do research in your field of practice, you have to sell your knowledge, you have to sell the technology. What is your approach, or what could be your approach to address this through the part of regulation in gaming?
Not only in gaming, but in the whole industry, in the whole fields, in all verticals from different kind of industries. Giving a knowledge is not so easy process and could be very complicated, especially when we talk about blockchain-based and artificial intelligence also. It looks very simple, but connecting different points of different industries could be very complex as a process in the behind the algorithmic structures, in the programming structures, in all these things. There are so many steps that should be fulfilled before we came up, for instance, with broader knowledge to the regulators. Starting this point is from always the base. We still have a misunderstanding what is a blockchain actually, how the people mostly people think about AI, it's just robots walking on the street. Actually, we have to teach and to give a knowledge about the data, about the data science, about big data analytics, such a kind of processes that's really behind of all processes in the AI and also in the blockchain. We need to go step by step and to learn the audience, to the whole society, how the data could be processed and what is data about actually. And after that will be much more easier to understand actually the AI, how the data sets work, how the learning process works, and how we can store the data and manage all the transactional processing with the blockchain. People look that the knowledge could be easily monetized through this process. That's true also, but we have to make a step-by-step procedures from the lowest level, how the people can understand the technology. And normally, when the audience, the society, understand how the processes work, it is not so harmful, and their data are actually protected, and they are the owners of their identity in a digital form, in a digital world. The digital transformation actually with whole technologies will be much more easily managed from the regulatories.
Excellent. Paula, keen to learn your view on this.
Yeah. Keen to comment on this as well. So we're in quite a unique and fortunate position at Mindway, because we actually have Birgitte Sand, who is the head of the ex-head
former
of the
regulator in Denmark.
of the Danish Regulatory Authority, who she sits on our board. So we get quite a bit of insight from her on how regulators think, and also it affords us reach to her base of connections, I guess, in that regulatory community. And one of the things that we've learned from working with her on this is that there is a real onus on the supplier as well. We have a duty to explain our solutions in a way that people actually understand them. So there's a load of massive brains behind all of this, but you also need the people that can translate that so that everybody can understand what we're doing and everybody can see how it maps to the regulation. We live in a world where obviously regulators come from different perspectives, from a real true outcome-based situation like we have in the UK to other regulators who are more prescriptive about what they expect from operators. But what we've actually done is we've taken each of the sort of regulatory frameworks that we work within and we've mapped our solutions to them and documented that, so we can actually show the operators that we work with, and in turn they can show the regulators, this is how we are meeting the stipulations. And when you do that and people understand it, they're more willing to then sit down and talk to you, definitely.
Definitely. I think it's easier to promote AI because it serves to protect players. Promoting blockchain, you have to deal with some obstacles just because of reputation, right?
That's right. That's right. Not only the obstacles, the first line is the challenges, actually, that we have by implementing and talking and explaining a blockchain. It's not so easy to understand that all transactions are just encrypted, the data are encrypted somewhere, no one can touch it, everything is somehow hidden, and it's not so easy to explain that what is the purpose, actually, of the transactional processing on that way that we are talking about the blockchain. Actually, in the behind the scene, the whole process is much more simpler and easier. Actually, we are just dealing with the strings of data which are encrypted and could not be decrypted, so on an easy way. And the owning of data is much more focused that the audience should understand, not only the whole mathematics that is behind in the programming structures. The people does not care. It's not necessary to explain harder, complex things to the audience. Just a small piece of understanding how the process can benefit them. Not only talk about the obstacles. Each technology has an obstacle. And in each novel thing that appears nowadays and also through the history, needs a time to be applied in all society verticals and industries.
So education and information.
Always education
counts.
and sharing the information on an open way. It's nothing to be hidden, actually, and it will be much more understandable.
Whenever we look at massive technology and energy consumption, there is a certain responsibility, which we call environmental social governance, of course. From the perspective of a small country outside of the European Union, Simon, what do you think, what is sustainability in technology and new, and gaming, of course?
Yeah, these are, of course, very large notions that we could go on for hours. Sustainability nowadays is often mentioned also in the context of ESG, environmental social governance, to some extent formally called corporate social responsibility, covering parts of these. And we see that this is becoming bigger and bigger because it's not something that is necessarily imposed by law, these standards, but more and more investors are asking for it. So say large pension funds, if they are shareholders of a company or investing there in a project, they often look at such issues. And I can give a couple of examples from the industry. Entain in early 2021 committed to net zero greenhouse gases emissions by 2035. So it's quite a bold step and announcement to make. And in the US, their partner MGM Resorts has come up with a comprehensive sustainability program that also includes reducing carbon emissions. So these two, from North America and Europe on the one hand, and on the other, are examples where you can see that. I could mention Kindred, which has excelled, I think, in the field of sustainability in gaming, exactly like trying to prevent that people gamble too much. I think we can see that very well. Or maybe another example, Microsoft in Ireland. They have the goal to have their data centers until 2025 run only with renewable energy. And we can see that investors demand this more and more to have figures on this.
Right, that sounds promising. Thank you very much. Due to the lovely reception last night, and thanks to Endorphina, I'm tired of asking questions now, but probably you are not. Maybe you have some questions, and if so, please raise any of these. Right, so thanks to Endorphina, you're tired too. This means I can close that panel, and please join me in thanking my exclusive, wonderful panelists in sharing their insights with us. Thank you so much.